Professor, what can you tell me about your work at the Ministry?
Your curiosity is understandable. Well, although I can't speak in any detail of my work, I can tell you certain interesting facts. Unspeakables work in the Ministry's Department of Mysteries. Dangerous work at times, as you've no doubt guessed.
Yes, Professor.
Now, you needn't concern yourself with my injury. I made peace long ago with the fact that a sprig of dittany, once plucked, will surely begin to wilt.
You do seem to have come to terms with things rather well.
It's a matter of perspective. Without saying more, perhaps whatever time I've lost was an exchange for time gained, and to dwell on such matters is a waste of the days ahead. At this point, no magic permits us to travel back in time. Perhaps one day. Yes, I can tell you that my years at the Ministry were well spent. And I'm as happy to be at Hogwarts now as I was to be in the Department of Mysteries years ago.
If I may, Professor, I'm also happy that you're here at Hogwarts now.
Kind of you to say. Speaking of time, perhaps yours would be best spent honing your defensive wand work.
Yes, Professor. Revelio. Professor, I wondered if I could ask how you came to Hogwarts.
I suppose that is not an unexpected question. After I told you about my time in Mahutokoro, it was a simple matter of fate, really. After my experience with the Toyohashi Tengu, I was determined to find work that would fulfill me. I accepted a position with the Japanese Ministry of Magic. I cannot tell you the specifics of my work. A few years into my post, I had the honor of working with Professor Weasley, at the time a curse breaker for the British Ministry.
Professor Weasley was a curse breaker for the Ministry.
She was. But I would advise you not to inquire upon it. She is quite clear that her focus is now Hogwarts. We coordinated, shall we say, defensive efforts on a particular matter, and were talking one evening about the rigors of our respective positions. She mentioned plans to return to Britain and Hogwarts specifically. I noted I could appreciate her decision. Her description of the school was so enchanting that when she wrote to me a few years later about the open position of flying professor, I was intrigued.
I suppose I can understand wanting to move on from all that you went through with the Tengu.
But that is not at all what happened. I was not moving on. What happened would always be a part of me. I learned from it. My reason for coming to Hogwarts was to expand my horizons.
Then you enjoy being a flying instructor, even after all that happened?
I do. And not despite all that happened, but because of it. You would do well to let lessons be just that, lessons. Learn from your errors, in judgment or otherwise. I am proud to impart such knowledge upon students, no matter where in the globe they may reside.
Could you spare a moment?
How may I help you?
I'm interested in the Goblin rebellions of the past.
Ah, certainly. Their history is part of our history. In fact, you can trace most Goblin rebellions to wizard intervention. More specifically, the laws governing wands and who may legally possess them. The Goblin Rebellion of 1612, for example, arose from Goblin frustration over lack of representation on the Wizengamot. It became a terrible, blood-soaked affair. Take heart, though. Our current peace and prosperity shows that violence can be transitory.
But Hogsmeade was just attacked, Professor.
If I'm not mistaken, and I rarely am, one of the 18th century's rebellions was led by Urg the Unclean. He had been dunked in a pond publicly by a group of young wizards, if you can imagine that. Another rebellion in 1752. The rebellion was so badly mishandled that Minister for Magic Albert Boot was forced to resign. That being said, his replacement, one Basil Flack, lasted mere weeks. Best sort of vindication, if you ask my opinion.
Please, go on.
2 months into Flack's tenure, bad went to worse when the werewolves allied with the goblins. Quite smartly, Flack resigned rather than deal with their combined forces. Minister Flack was succeeded by one Hephaestus Gore, who quickly quashed the Jewel uprisings with his signature brutality. It is worth noting that many historians believe this punitive response led to even more werewolf conflict. You have noted all of this, have you not?
Oh yes, Professor. Please, continue.
Continue? I take it your thirst for knowledge has yet to be quenched.
If you would be so kind, Professor Binns.
I rarely find an audience, captive or otherwise, eager to engage in such historical minutiae.
I find your lectures quite engaging, sir. Thank you for sharing your vast knowledge.
My sincere pleasure. Now, I do believe I should be preparing for my next class. Good day to you.
Professor, what did you mean when you said your education wasn't traditional?
I had bet myself a butterbeer you'd be back to ask about that. It seems I've earned myself a trip to the Three Broomsticks. My father insisted rather adamantly that fun had no place when it came to learning. I struggled with his rather Socratic method of teaching, made no progress with even the simplest spells until I made a game of it. As the process itself became a source of joy, I was able to better retain what I was being taught. I realized then how much fun was to be had in learning, and I decided to become a professor so that I may pass that joy along.
I, for one, am glad. I very much enjoy your class.
Delighted to hear. Now, I shall not keep you from your studies, nor time with your fellow students, both of which are invaluable to your education.
Professor, do you have a moment?
I do.
May I ask what attracted you to astronomy?
You may. Might I assume from your inquiry that you wonder how anyone may have an interest in astronomy?
Oh, not at all, Professor. I find it intriguing and wanted to know more about your work.
Ah, that is good to hear. So often those who do not fully understand all that can be gleaned from the stars question astronomy's relevance. Misperceptions frequently arise due to the confusion of astronomy with astrology, the ridiculousness of which I shall not deign to discuss. To answer your question, it was my dear sister who first sparked my interest in stargazing. The two of us spent countless nights on our rooftops staring at the cosmos. It was one of the only subjects we could study together.
I'm not sure I follow, Professor. Why was that?
My sister is a squib. Clever, hard-working, and generous, but a squib nonetheless. The only non-magical child born to our family in generations, poor thing. Although she manages exceptionally well.
It sounds as if she's a lovely person, and accomplished.
She is. And to her credit, while she was once disappointed not to attend Hogwarts, she has excelled in Muggle school. One of the first women, we suspect, to have attended Cambridge, well disguised at the time by our mother as a gentleman scholar. And as astronomy is one subject shared between the Muggle world and ours, she and I have been able to maintain that common interest. We still sneak up to a rooftop now and then to gaze upwards, courtesy of a levitation charm rather than a trellis nowadays.
Thank you for telling me about your sister, Professor.
I was glad to. It is good to be reminded of all that one can accomplish when one embraces who one is. Now off you go. I am sure you've a star chart to review somewhere.
Professor, might I have a moment?
Yes. What is it?
I was wondering, what inspired your interest in magical beasts?
Are you considering some sort of profession in the field?
I haven't decided quite yet, but I do find magical beasts fascinating.
You do seem to engage well with the beasts in class. I believe that when choosing a path, particularly of a scholarly nature, one must take into account both one's enthusiasm for a particular subject, as well as how one may best serve the students to whom one is obligated to both inspire and teach.
Of course, Professor. When did your path become clear?
I recall it quite vividly. It was the summer between my 6th and 7th years. I read in the Prophet about a wizard who'd been selling alchemy eggs and disappeared in the mountains near my home. I knew of the alchemy, of course, from my studies, but they are native to lands east of here, such as India. I wondered if it was possible that an alchemy could be so nearby. Hence, I went to find it.
Seems quite a challenge, finding an alchemy in the mountains.
It was. After a few days, during which my parents grew increasingly annoyed at my absence, I found what little remained of the wizard egg trader. He was near a tree hollow, and there, inside, was a nest with 7 silver alchemy eggs.
What did you do with them?
Nothing. Beasts are to be valued for what they can provide for wizard kind. Protective clothing, potion ingredients, even wand cores. Only poachers see the value in ending a beast's life for galleons. I left the eggs alone. I hid. And moments later, the beast flew right over my head. Breathtaking. She then seemed to all but disappear as she shrunk to fit into the hollow.
That sounds incredible.
Indeed. I knew in that moment that I needed to understand all that I could about beasts and ensure that wizard kind learned to benefit properly from them. Now, I trust that I have answered your question. You would do well to continue your study of beasts, regardless of your chosen path. Beasts and all that they provide will vastly improve your life, and perhaps one day even save it.
I shall remember that, Professor. Thank you.